out of his way to grab your attention is because he wants you to listen. What are the things that grabs our attention? When my plan no longer fits, when my strategy no longer works, I have to assume that God is trying to tell me something. He orders her to listen. The second thing he does is he orders her to look. It says, he's not here for he's risen. And then he says, come see the place where the Lord lay. He goes, don't take my word for it. I want you to go look for confirmation of what I'm saying. When God begins to speak to you and the shift and the transition in your life, I want you to master the art of looking for confirmation.
Yes, okay.
As opposed to looking for doubt.
There we go.
Looking for failure. When God gives you a word, don't look at all the ways that you failed, all the ways that it did not work.
Okay.
Instead, begin to nurture your spirit to look for confirmation.
Yes.
He says he's not here, but you go see that he's not here. And then he orders her to launch heaven's agenda. He says, and go quickly. Tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead.
There we go.
When he says to go quickly, he's telling her that heaven has an agenda and you're going to be the vessel, you're going to be the tunnel that the Lord uses to launch heaven's agenda. Each of us ought to be tunnels on earth as it is in heaven. That my life ought to be the way that heaven invades the earth. Which means that I have an agenda from heaven to launch everywhere I go. Not just when I'm speaking, I'm talking about when I'm in the grocery store. I'm the difference in the grocery store. I'm the difference at that job. I'm launching heaven's agenda wherever I go. And sometimes heaven's agenda is to dethrone people who have been in the wrong position, but sometimes heaven's agenda is just to be nice to people. Sometimes heaven's agenda is just to recognize that your life is a light in a dark world. We have an opportunity to launch heaven's agenda, and then he does something. He says something that I thought was very fascinating. After he tells her to go, it says in verse 8 that she went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to bring his disciples word. I thought it was interesting that she went out with fear and great joy, primarily because the first thing the angel says to her is, do not be afraid. And yet she obeys, she goes. But she goes with fear and great joy. Which communicated to me that this is a woman who understood the difference between having fear and being fear. Because God hasn't given us the spirit, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So it's one thing to have fear, it's another thing for fear to have you. And we have to be willing to master the art of obeying even when we are afraid. Obeying even when we have fear. Because when we learn to obey even when we have fear, we allow fear to become our audience. We allow fear to catch up and become the audience that views what God is doing in and through our lives. If you are waiting to do it when you are no longer afraid, you may never get started at all. But if you can learn that you can take your fear with you and obey anyway, God will help you understand that fear was just a masquerade, that fear actually had no power. But as long as you are allowing your fear to control your destiny, you have made fear your Lord. But when you say fear, even you are going to have to obey what God has said, and I believe that my results will help me to combat those fears. That's what she does. But what I thought was most beautiful is that she went with great joy. Because a lot of us don't mind doing things afraid. But what we struggle with is doing it with great joy. We don't mind being in fight or flight. We spend most of our lives afraid. We don't mind obeying in fear. We've had to do that to do